Welcome to this WTR Flashcast. I'm your host, Shawn Severson, CEO and co-founder of WTR Research. In today's podcast, I'm joined by my colleague, James Kisner, a new addition to our technology research team. James will be sharing insights today on his recently published primer on artificial intelligence, and especially on 50 undercovered companies in AI. Very interesting report. Encourage you to take a look at it, everybody. James, thanks for coming on to the podcast today. To start, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you're focusing on in terms of your coverage strategy in AI for WTR Research?
Sure, Shawn. Thanks. So I'm a former sell-side analyst. I spent about 12 years covering technology stocks across a range of sectors, including communications equipment, IT hardware, semiconductors, software, and services. And after that, I took a bit of a sabbatical from research and went to the corporate side. I became the head of investor relations for Supermicro, where I led an overhaul of their IR program. And incidentally, Supermicro became a major player in the AI infrastructure space during that time. From there, I moved to Backblaze as VP of Investor Relations and Financial Planning, where Backblaze is an infrastructure software company focused on cloud storage services. Now I'm back in a research role at WTR Research, focusing on the technology sector again. One of my key focus areas is artificial intelligence, a theme that's very near and dear to my heart.
Thanks for that. James. And just a little bit about what brought you to WTR Research. We have a very unique platform here, and being research analyst and founder myself, very familiar with what drew me to building the business. But what about you as an analyst? Coming to WTR and your coverage approach.
Well, I was energized by several important things. First, it lets me return to research, but with the added perspective of having been on the corporate side. Second, I get to cover companies that are often overlooked, names that don't have a dozen analysts writing about them every quarter, which makes the work both creative and high impact. Also, I get to go in depth on these companies to help investors truly understand these companies, their products, and the trends driving their business, and interact with their management teams. And thirdly, the firm itself has a really powerful distribution and content platform. Because we don't publish ratings or price targets, our work can reach the broadest base of investors directly, and we can circulate our research on social media. So that combination, the freedom to go deep on interesting names and the ability to reach a wide audience, makes WTR Research a special opportunity that I was really excited about.
Yeah, and it really changes, investors digesting information from so many different sources today, right? From whether it's X or LinkedIn, and being able to get through those distribution channels is certainly an impactful way to develop and distribute research. So thanks for that, James. Next part, look, you just published an industry primer, and the title of it for everybody is a survey of 50 undercovered companies in AI. And I think that walk through the methodology and what you set out to accomplish with this, because I do think it's a very unique research piece and approach to AI.
Sure. We started by looking for smaller and mid-cap names, companies with market caps generally under 30 billion that are deeply involved in AI. So we cast a wide net across more than 15 industries, not just tech, but also healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, and industrials. The second major filter was analyst coverage. So across our broader data set of almost 400 companies, the average was just 5 analysts covering. And a meaningful number of those companies had just 0 or 1 analyst covering them. So these are truly underfollowed stories that many investors may never have heard of. So from there, we created what we call an AI Centricity Score. So that's a 1 to 10 scale that gauges how central AI is to each company in their business model or their external offerings to customers. Then we selected the companies that 50 companies that scores of 4 or higher, profiled their AI initiatives, and categorized each one of them into one of 11 application areas, though a company could count for more than one of those areas. Finally, we analyzed which segments created the most shareholder value based on market cap gains.
And James, what was the conclusion from this? I know it's a big report, covers a lot of stuff, but what are the key takeaways you'd get in front of investors first?
So, if we aggregate the value created by all the companies here, the group created about $76.5 billion in market cap. That includes, the net of both losers and winners. And for the 48 names that had a full year of trading, they were up about 132%. That compares to 27% for the NASDAQ, which is pretty eye-opening. That said, the outperformance came from a relatively small number of outsized winners. When we broke it down by application, the largest value creation came from infrastructure and platforms. That's the picks and shovels of AI, and also from quantum computing. And after that, these specialized workflow owners, the core AI companies whose businesses are fundamentally AI driven, as well as players in healthcare and drug discovery, industrial IoT, and computer vision, all created a lot of value. Finally, we had what we'd call battleground categories, things like media and synthetic content, customer support, marketing, and edge AI chips that created some value, but not nearly as much. Now, it's important to note there's some selection bias here. And of course, there are some other big names outside our sample. I'm thinking of like semis like NVIDIA and Broadcom that have created staggering value and remain capacity constrained for at least the next couple of years. But nonetheless, I thought these learnings were pretty interesting.
What were some of the more surprising things that you found as you went through the report?
Well, the big thing that was surprising to me was, we looked at the correlation between AI centricity and stock performance. Again, AI centricity being how focused the company is on AI. And surprisingly, there was almost no correlation between the two. And that could reflect the nature of our sample. And these are smaller, undercovered companies, or maybe just timing. A lot of these companies are still in the early innings of monetizing their AI initiatives. So it could simply reflect competitive dynamics or execution differences as well. So the point is, AI focus alone wasn't enough. What matters is where and how AI is applied.
In the context of the report, are there a couple that companies you'd like to point out to investors?
Well, as they say, as a parent, you're supposed to love all your children equally, and I do, but here are a handful that I think investors might find particularly interesting. The first is Nebius, ticker's NBIS, one of the biggest creators of market value over the past year. So Nebius is basically, the supercomputer for rent that's powering the AI boom. Microsoft actually turned to them for extra GPU horsepower to train its next generation AI models. It's a massive validation for such a young company. They're also helping startups punch way above their weight. So one example is a design firm. Nebius was used to train a model 8 times larger than what's called Stable Diffusion. And for context, Stable Diffusion is one of the most widely used image AIs in the world. Building something that's much bigger means richer detail, more creativity, and greater realism. And that kind of leap, that's something normally only big tech firms can pull off. So Nebius made that possible for this company. It's not just the tech sector. Media companies are using their cloud to instantly dub films into 70 languages with Nebius. So they're quite the powerhouse behind the scenes, making all this AI magic run. And again, this is a company that's got very few analysts, I think 5 analysts covering them, even though their cap is getting in the tens of billions. The next example I'd like to highlight is called Evolve Technology. The ticker is EVLV. So they've taken what used to feel like airport security and turned it into something closer to walking into a theme park. Their AI-powered scanners spot weapons in real time, no stopping, no emptying your pockets. At Nissan Stadium, for example, where the Tennessee Titans play, they basically eliminated those dreaded 30-minute lines. At some venues, they're screening 16,000 people through a single gate in minutes. Evolved systems are now in hundreds of locations, stadiums, schools, hospitals, and they scan more than 1 billion people, while detecting thousands of weapons each day. So it's a perfect example of AI making everyday life safer and more efficient for the everyday person. So finally, I'll talk about Paladine AI, ticker's PDYN. They build the brains for robots and drones. So one of their Air Force projects taught a robot to sand and prep aircraft parts. That's work normally done by skilled mechanics. The robot actually learned to adjust to each part on its own. Then they took that same intelligence into the air, developing drone swarms that coordinate information and scout territory autonomously. No pilot input needed at all. So it's like watching a flock of birds that think together. Just wild stuff. It's a glimpse of how AI is turning machines into true teammates. So honestly, the stuff of science fiction.
There's some great ideas, James. Thanks for that. What's looking ahead? Who do you want to engage with next?
So, as I mentioned before, we profiled 50 companies, but our broader index, our sample includes nearly 400. So in many ways, we've really just scratched the surface of what's happening in AI. We'd love to hear from more companies doing innovative things. My door is wide open. My email's right there in our research notes. So I encourage, any companies working on any AI initiatives they'd like to talk about to reach out.
So any final thoughts on AI more broadly? Obviously, there's a lot of debate out there today on valuation and whether we're in a bubble. And I mean, all the commentary out there. What's your take on it?
Well, I think it's always smart to keep a healthy dose of skepticism in investing, especially when valuations get stretched. So, and we're seeing some pretty heady numbers out there, particularly in the private markets. And themes like circular investments and vendor financing do rhyme a bit with the .com area when we obviously had a pretty big correction. So I do think that AI is different. It's truly transformative technology, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's already reshaping industries and society. And I think we're still in the early innings in terms of how broadly and deeply it will be used. My biggest concern right now is infrastructure. Energy and data center capacity are becoming real bottlenecks. That's something everyone in the space should be watching. But big picture, I'd say this: anyone who thinks AI is overhyped probably isn't using it very much. Once you see what it can do up close, it's really hard to not see the long-term potential.
So, James, thanks for those insights from your AI industry primer on 50 undercover companies in AI. Also, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick. And thank you all listeners as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, as well as visit our website at www.watertowerresearch.com, where you can read James' latest research on the technology and artificial intelligence space, as well as access countless other research, events, and podcasts, fireside chats, etc., including our industry-specific symposiums on our website. Again, that's all open access for investors, and encourage you to check it out. We'll see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight. Thank you, everyone.